This video is brought to you by Law Excellence IAS Academy.
Dear students, good morning. Let us start the discussion on today's newspaper, that is 20th April 2019. The first article, Humanise the Law. This is about the draft Indian Forest Act. So this talks about the bureaucratic overreach in the new draft Indian Forest Act. So before understanding this, let us go to the backgrounder. Indian Forest Act was enacted in 1927 by the Britishers for the first time. If any law that has to be said as draconian in the lives of the forest dwellers, it is none other than Indian Forest Act 1927. Inhabitants of the forest land are at a single stroke of a law are declared as its illegal occupants. Any kind of community living in the forest, it has to make an agreement with the establishment officer and has to vacate the forest. Or they have to prove themselves that forest is their home. So in this context, many of the people have lost their particular land. It also has led to many kinds of rebellion. So in spite of this, the forest bureaucracy was able to crush them. So the forest bureaucracy is a British legacy. Britishers saw the forests as the source of the resource, especially the wood. But later, the Indian government also took the same tone of the Britishers and further nurtured the forest bureaucracy. So now, the management of the forest, there are two approaches by and large. One is the state centric bureaucratic approach, and the next one is community led approach. The bureaucracy centric approach believes that if the people are being kept outside the forest, then forests can be protected. The community led approach, what it says is their lives are integrated with the forest and they have a self interest in protecting the forest. So, in this context, if more the protection is our needs of the protection, for if they are fulfilled if they are community led. So today Indian Forest Act, which is going to be brought in, is also giving greater strength to the bureaucracy led protection of the forests. And the second, till now there is no scientific evaluation of the protection of the forests in India. So status of the forest report is released. Beyond that, how the various protective measures have really led to the outcomes, we are not very clear of. Another force in the management of the forest is environmental impact assessment. In this, any of the power project or any developmental project in a particular forest land has to clearly estimate the impact it is creating on the environment. Who is the person that has to conduct the environmental impact assessment? The person who is going to make the project over there and has to submit a report. Obviously, when he has a natural interest in taking the project forward, he will try to manipulate the environmental impact assessment to his advantage. That's why EIAs more or less have become a force today. And the second, there are certain conservationalists who says that if forest dwellers and tribals, if they do not live in the forest, wildlife can be well protected. So in this entire thing, today the government is by and large believing in bureaucratic centric approach towards forest conservation, and Indian Forest Act which is about to come reflects this. Saffron error. It is about Pragya Singh being fielded as a candidate in Bhopal. So, a person who is facing the charges of terror against her being fielded from one of the major political party is said to be first of its kind. Now, in this context, I am not worried about Pragya Singh or BJP. The criminalization of the politics is not new. There are many people who are facing the grave charges of crime and still are contesting the elections. In this context, the representation of the People's Act, how it deals with the criminalization of politics, is important to us. If for certain types of the crimes like practice of sati, untouchability, and corruption, in this case, the any person who is convicted he is disqualified to contest elections for the period of conviction plus 6 years. And the second, any person for other crimes, if he is convicted for more than 2 years, he is disqualified to contest the elections. So, in this context, the second ARC made an important recommendation. So, what it states is, if an individual's right to contest and people's right to have good representation come in contestation with each other, then people's right to have good representation has to prevail. It means if a criminal has a right to contest and if it comes in contradiction with citizens' right to have a good leadership, the second has to prevail over the first. So, today only if an individual is convicted, then only he will be disqualified. But as our criminal justice system, judicial process is very slow, convictions are very less. So, many of the people who are involved with grievous or crimes, these are being able to contest the elections. So, what the second ARC says is, for anywhere court accepts the charges of an individual, at the level of the charges itself, he or she shall be disqualified to contest the elections. So, if a case is filed, then it has to be inquired and a charge sheet has to be filed. So, at the charge sheet level, if an individual is disqualified, then opposite political factions will create many false charges and disqualify the competent candidates. The way forward this is improvising the judicial process and providing for the fast track courts to conduct the trial where the political leadership is involved. That is what the Supreme Court thought is. Supreme Court has ordered for fast track courts to complete the judicial process involving the political leadership. Either way, the news is bad. Let me give you certain economic standards. Inflation around 9%, close to double digit. And then fiscal deficit is around 6 to 7%. Growth less than 3%. So, if any country has such things, these indices, and if it is a developing country, is this a situation to panic or not? If yes, the country is called Pakistan. So, in this scenario, International Monetary Fund, the Pakistani Prime Minister resisted himself to go to IMF. Normally, if country goes to IMF in these circumstances, the structural adjustment program related reforms are essential. So, what IMF will suggest? Decrease your expenditure. And the second, it tries to reduce the subsidies. In Pakistan, there is a unique situation. In spite of this worse economic scenario, the country cannot cut the military or defense expenditure. So, the defense expenditure, talking about it is a taboo. And every civilian leadership is able to continue in the office only if he shows that loyalty and if he do not crosses that particular line, breach that particular line of defense expenditure. So, the devaluation of the currency and then more and more austerity measures and tightening of this, the fiscal space, everything is going to worst affect the poor and marginalized. So, the Pakistan is at the brink of world or economic collapse. So, is it a good news for India? No. So, whenever the economic collapse happens, obviously the disarray will attract more people to jihadism or more people to terrorism, and this need to be noted. And the next, a dialogue with our fragile past. So, remember in France, this Notre Dame, it is under fire. So this can be a question, but don't worry much about this article. So why is it important? So the Joan of Arc beatified over here, Napoleon Bonaparte crowned, and then farewell to the famous President Charles de Gaulle happened from this particular cathedral. So the cathedral Notre Dame, it is under fire. So, protecting the heritage is about recollecting and introspecting about our own past and our humanity. That's what the essence of this article is. And the next, the traders and politicians slam governments over suspension of cross LOC trade. One of the confidence building measure between India and Pakistan is LOC trade. And many of the, including WTO, many of the reports, what they say is India and Pakistan both are losing for lack of a direct trade between these two countries. So Indian government stopped LOC trade, citing counterfeit currency, terrorists, and weapons, and all the contraband is entering India through this LOC trade. So now, if we critically analyze, this is appears as a knee-jerk reaction. Why? See, India cannot have any control if it disconnects all its relations, engagements with Pakistan. So, if India wants to have a control over the narrative on Kashmir, it shall be able to more and more engage with the Pakistan, but disconnecting with Pakistan will not help to solve the problem in any way. That's how it can be put up as. And finally, thank you much. Have a good day. All the best.